(1940) Michigan's population reaches 5,256,106. In January, South Haven's ministers plan for shared Lenten services as the world's news agencies talk of war and battles. Reverend Albert Worden offers FBC as one of the many churches to participate. From America's perspective, President Roosevelt offers no new plans for the United States' involvement in the war in Europe. In state news, Matilda D. Wilson becomes the first woman in Michigan to serve as lieutenant governor. Oldsmobile becomes the first car maker to offer fully automatic transmission. In national news, FDR is reelected for an unprecedented third term of office. The first official network television broadcast is put out by NBC. Congress passed the Selective Service and Training Act, America's first peacetime draft law. On the world front, Winston Churchill is elected Prime Minister of Great Britain, while in Europe, Hitler invades Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. Back home, FBC puts on an operetta called Indian Moon, which was well received by the community. Because many in South Haven were still recovering from the Depression, fish from Lake Michigan were often added to the supper meal. In November, FBC hosts the community's Armistice Day, remembering the cessation of hostilities on the Western Front during World War I, which took effect at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. This later became Veterans Day. Tragedy hits the South Haven's community as a fierce early winter storm covers the Midwest. 8 men who were fishing on their boats drowned in Lake Michigan because of gale force winds and high wave action. On November 22nd, services were held for the 8 deceased members. During this month, the local churches planned their Thanksgiving service to include a collection of canned fruit and vegetables for local relief efforts for community members. 1941. On the national scene, a newly passed Lend-Lease law is signed by President Roosevelt. It provided arms for Great Britain, with auto plants being converted to the production of war materials. Michigan becomes known as the Arsenal of Democracy. On the home front, the local library, now the Arts Center, is seen covered with ivy. To help celebrate the 4th of July holiday, local churches were having union services. However, due to an illness, FBC's pastor, Reverend Worden, could not participate. A few weeks later, Pastor Worden died. In August, Dr. Carlos M. Dinsmore preached for 2 Sundays. On September 8th, it was announced that Dr. Dinsmore was to become FBC's new pastor. Moving from New York, he would officially start the 1st of October. In November, a refugee dinner is planned for relief conditions resulting from the war overseas. Just 2 weeks later, Japan made their attack on Pearl Harbor. America now enters World War II. Life was about to change in South Haven. By the time the war ends, 673,000 men and women from Michigan will have served in the armed forces. Meanwhile, in secret meetings, the atomic bomb research project, known as the Manhattan Project, begins. 1942, the Declaration of United Nations is signed in Washington on January 1st. In an open letter to the Michigan governor, South Haven pleads their case as 2/3 of its workers will be without a job due to a lack of materials which were being shifted towards the war effort. Many men from the area will enlist or be drafted to support the fighting in the Pacific or in Europe. Fearing concerns of national sabotage, President Roosevelt pens an executive order for the internment of Japanese Americans, which includes the seizure of their property. More than 120,000 Japanese and persons of Japanese ancestry living in the western U.S. are moved to relocation centers. From the FBC Ledger of the March meeting, the Women's League financial report shows money raised from bazaars, rummage and bake sales, and other fundraisers and donations were used to help pay for church expenditures, which included funding summer camps and helping community members in need. In April, South Haven's downtown closed for Good Friday services. It is during this time that the Selective Service Draft makes changes that allows men between ages of 45 to 65 to serve in the military. 602 men from the community register for this fourth draft at the city office. Several are veterans from World War I. In Europe, Nazi leaders attend the Wannsee Conference to coordinate the final solution to the Jewish question, the systematic genocide of Jews, known as the Holocaust. In the nation to assist with the defense of America and allow more men for fighting, the Women's Military Service is established. At home, congregations throughout the town lend spiritual aid to our soldiers. To aid the war effort, automobile production in the U.S. for private consumers is halted until 1945. In May, some 60 local members of Michigan State troops, filling in for Michigan's National Guard, returned home to South Haven after spending 18 days of guard duty in Detroit. Their purpose was to help quell racial unrest and prevent riots. In October, an FBC membership drive contest is initiated. 2 teams are created, and the team with the greatest number of new members wins a prize. In December at the University of Chicago, Enrico Fermi achieves the first nuclear chain reaction. Groundwork for an atomic bomb continues. Meanwhile, war rages on in the Pacific and on the Japanese mainland. 1943, Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt hold the Casablanca Conference to strategize war efforts. In February, there is a shoe buying surge because word had it that leather goods will be rationed to support the war effort. In May, South Haven established a permanent ration office, which included a board of officers. The first items for control are gasoline, tires, and fuel oil. Application forms, ration books, and coupons will be managed for area residents. President Roosevelt also freezes prices, salaries, and wages to prevent inflation. It was also at this time that withholding for income tax is introduced. In June, riots take place in Detroit, leaving 34 dead and hundreds injured. Tensions increase due to a lack of jobs and a housing shortage because of an influx of nearly 400,000 migrants, mostly African Americans and white Southerners, who were looking for factory work for the war effort. Meanwhile, in South Haven, Citizens State Bank puts up a city clock that can be seen on Main Street of downtown. They consider this a gift to the city. On the world scene, Allied invasions of Europe start taking place. Mussolini is voted out of power by his own Grand Council and arrested. In New York City, Oklahoma, the first musical, written by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, opens on Broadway. In November, South Haven gets uplifted with a local hero, Sergeant Robert Sink. As a ball turret gunner and assistant aerial engineer, he participated and survived 25 bombing missions. He also was credited with sending 5 German fighter planes spinning to the ground. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. In December, FBC assists other churches with the gathering of white gifts for Goodfellows Christmas baskets, along with praying for their sons and husbands to be shielded by the hand of God and bring them home safely to live out their faith.